Remember, I told you that atom has to be electrically neutral, but sometimes in a chemical reaction, an atom may lose or gain electron. So once it loses electron, that means it is losing negative charge. So the positive charge takes the control, so the ion then becomes positively charged. Whereas when something gains electrons, then that means there's more negative charge compared to a positive charge. So the so the so the ion basically becomes negatively charged. So where we have more electrons compared to the protons, we say it is a negatively charged ion, and that makes sense because the electron is negatively charged, whereas protons are positively charged. When there are less electrons compared to protons, then this is positively charged ion. So, for example, an atom, this an atom might lose may an atom may lose 3 electrons. So we say that it is deficient of 3 electrons, so it basically has a positive charge. So loss of 3 electrons, for example, iron when loses 3 electrons, then it gets 3 plus charge. Aluminium when it loses 3 electrons, it gets a 3 plus charge as well. So this basically shows ions since they're not electrically neutral. Now let's get to the review questions. So try to do it yourself and try to answer it yourself, but you should be able to answer it yourself, and then look for the answers from this video as well. So how many atoms make up one molecule of chlorine gas? So one molecule of chlorine gas, for this basically we have two atoms, right? And then differentiate between an atom and a molecule. So atom is basically just a single particle, whereas molecule is basically made up of more than one atom, two or more than two atoms. A molecule of an element and a molecule of a compound. For a molecule of an element, for example, we already discussed the definition. For that, we know that for a molecule, it has to be two or more than two atoms, and for an element, the atom type has to be same, right? So, for example, O3, ozone, or let's talk about there's another gas. For example, N2, nitrogen gas, that has the same nitrogen atom, which is the same type, but two atoms. So nitrogen molecule is basically the molecule of an element. If you talk about a molecule of a compound, so let's talk about carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide has two types of atoms, carbon and oxygen. So carbon, why am I exactly calling it a compound? Because it has two types of atoms. Now complete the table below. So if the atomic number is 17, then the number of protons should also be 17, and number of electrons in an atom, because atom is always electrically neutral, it is also going to be 17. Now if you talk about the Cl negative, that means it has one more negative charge. That means one, for example, if it has 17 protons, then for this it needs to have 18 electrons. So 18, for example, 17 minus 18 is basically minus 1. So that's why we have got the -1 charge over here. So number of electrons are going to be 18, whereas remember, number of protons never change. If the number of protons change, then the identity of an atom also changes, right? Do you see that with 17 proton number it is chlorine, but with 19 proton number it becomes potassium. I'm going to do this one with you as well. So potassium has 19 protons and 19 atomic number, that means 19 protons. For it to be electrically neutral, it needs to have 19 electrons as well. But once it gets a positive charge, that means it has more protons and one more proton. So that means the proton number is of course going to remain same, which is 19, but the number of electron is going to be 18. So 18. So basically 19 minus 18 is basically +1, so it gets a +1 charge over here. State the number and types of atoms present in carbon tetrachloride. So tetra means 4, and the chemical symbol for chlorine or chloride is basically Cl. So the number, so we have two types of atoms, carbon and chlorine, and the number is that carbon is only going to come once whereas chlorine is going to come 4 times. The chemical formula of carbon monoxide is CO, that of carbon dioxide is CO2. Write down one similarity and one difference between carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide in terms of their atomic composition. So if you talk, so that I'll give you a hint. Just look at the type of atoms, right? How many type of atoms um, are there in carbon monoxide and how many types of atoms are there in carbon dioxide, and then you can also talk about the number of each kind of atom. So the atomic number of magnesium is 12. State the number of protons. Remember, when whatever is the atomic number is also the number of proton and the number of electrons that each magnesium atom has. So for it, when I say that it is an atom, it means it has to be electrically neutral. So 12 atomic number means 12 protons, and then you also have 12 electrons. What are the other subatomic particles which make up the magnesium atom besides the protons and electrons? We all know that neutrons also make up the nucleus. So neutron is the subatomic particle that is still not discussed. So when magnesium ribbon burns in oxygen gas, each magnesium atom loses 2 electrons to each oxygen atom, and a white solid magnesium oxide is formed. Write down the name and the symbol of the particle formed when magnesium atom loses 2 electrons. So basically this is a reaction where oxygen in the presence of oxygen gas, magnesium ribbon burns, and then it basically produces a compound which is called magnesium oxide. So now we have to write down the name and the symbol of the particle formed when magnesium atom loses 2 electrons. So when it loses electron, that means it is no more electrically neutral. So we can't call it an atom, we are going to call it an ion. And is it because it is losing 2 electrons, we are going to call it a positively charged ion. Or the chemical symbol is basically Mg, and above that we'll write +2. Write down the name and the symbol of the particle formed when oxygen atom gains 2 electrons. So when oxygen gets more electron, that means it is again going to become an ion, but a negatively charged ion. So O, and above that we'll write -2. Now diagram below shows the atoms and the molecules of some gases which can be found in air. Identify the gases which exist as atoms. So this is going to be an atom. No, this is going to be a molecule. See, wherever we have only one, the number of atom is only one. So xenon, argon, neon, and krypton. So they're all 4 of them are basically the noble gases. That's why they're basically in the atomic form. Then we have the identify the gases which exist as molecules of elements and state how many atoms make up each. So molecule of elements, we need to have same type of atoms, so nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. Identify the gases which exist as molecules of compounds and state the types and the number of atoms. So carbon dioxide has carbon and 2 oxygen atoms, so 2 types, and the carbon is going to come once, whereas oxygen is going to come twice. Methane, we have 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens. So you have 2 types of atoms, and hydrogen is going to come 4 times, whereas carbon is going to come 1 time. So that's all. I hope this video will help you.